if I use these sliders, because it's to change thing to me. I don't know. I don't really feel like it's coming together. There's also something about the combination of oh, my coffee machine is rinsing itself. 1 minute. I have this coffee machine with espresso beans, and then sometimes it randomly turns off and all this water starts pouring through it, and it turns off for the day. So now it's going to get some rest until tomorrow. So the color scheme is a bit muddy at this point, and I'm not really digging it that much. I do want her shirt to be a bit lighter, so I'm just going to add something. At this point, you know, I'm not into the color scheme, so I'm just adding random stuff. And I think one of the most important things you can do to get the color scheme sort of working is to change the color of the lines. So, and to start with, of course, set them on multiply so that the color of the lines blends. Right now they're just black, and I feel like black on top, like blending with the color, usually just.
Если это не работает, блядь. Нихуя не работает, блядь. Как? Cancel. Почему? Уе мое. Как? Как? Да. Сборка. Сборка. Режим. Black.
Just creates like a sort of grayish effect. So when I change the line color and make it something super saturated, then it already changes the color scheme a bit. And I think that this purpley pink color scheme for the lines is working very well because it blends nicely with the more neutral-ish kind of colors underneath and the pink accent. Next, I'm just going to, I have this sort of bluish background color, but I'm just going to change it to white because I feel like it's throwing me off. And then what I love doing, if I can find it, let's see. Image, adjustments, selective color. So this is my favorite tool to change the color scheme. What it does is you can pick like a range of color from this menu, and then you sort of play around with the sliders. And you can see that it makes subtle changes to a specific color range. So right now it's only changing the reds. And then it's not only like specifically red that it changes, but just the reds as a range, so it'll affect the pinkish colors as well. And I really like it because then what it does with these sliders is you slide them around and then you just see like what happens to the drawing, what happens to the colors. Is it helping or not? And I feel like in this case, changing the pink accent to a bit of more like a reddish, tomatoey color almost, it works better. Yellows is a good one to change at this point because her skin tone is super yellow. So we can use these sliders to make her skin tone a bit more peach, a little bit more, you know, like it's not too yellow basically. And then blues is probably going to do a lot if I use these sliders because the base color is a sort of dark blue. And I really like, I'm usually very conflicted between like making it more bluish, like a sort of pure blue, or making it more yellowish, because I feel like both really work. So I'm usually at this point sort of trying some stuff out and trying to decide, okay, what direction will I take? So I'm gonna go for more of a yellowish tone here. The whites are always, I always like sort of bringing them down in the slider and making them a bit less, making it more of a low light kind of effect. Because I really like, I like it when there's not too much contrast. Like I like it when there's a lot of contrast in the colors, but not too much in the lighting. So that's just personal preference. And changing the sliders on the neutrals does the most because this one is picking up a lot of the color tones as neutral. So basically moving these sliders around will completely change your color scheme. And honestly, like if you go for this color, I think this is a bit iffy. Personally, it's a little too much. It's like destructive. It ruins a lot of the colors. So I'm gonna try to sort of not slide all the way to the end, but just keep it sort of towards the middle and just test what works. I could go for something a bit more reddish, or I could make it a bit, I think that this is working. So I like it. Now I'm going to sort of try a new background color that sort of matches this. So once you have something that works, just try to go from there rather than trying to get all your colors correct first. Just try to get like 2 colors to work, and then you can sort of move out from there and just add stuff based on how well it's working. So I'm okay with a bit of a neutral tone. This is fine. And then it's a bit flat. So I'm gonna use gradients, which is one of my absolute favorite Photoshop tools. And use gradient to sort of add a bit of light coming from behind her. And I gave a workshop in Brazil last month, or no, 2 months ago. And when I told them about gradients and how wonderful gradients are, a lot of them said that they had been instructed not to use gradients because gradients were considered to be kind of tacky and too easy of a tool to use. But for me, I think gradients are just one of the best tools that you can get in digital software because it creates like gradations that sort of force you to follow, your eye follows the change in color. So with that, you can create visual flow. You can basically, in this case, lead the eye from the darker outside area towards the center, which is what you want. You want to focus on the figure. So I'm a huge fan of gradients. I use them all the time. I'm going to soften this one a bit. I'm going to change the colors a little bit too, make it a little more reddish. And now I'd say we're good to move to the next step, which is grouping all the layers together. Again, like I did with the line art. And then duplicating that group, merging it. Everything's together now, which means that I can do one more round of color correction and it will affect everything, the lines and the colors that have been blocked in and the background, which is why I prefer to work on one layer, because it just makes life so much easier when it comes to color correcting. So, all right, we're okay to start finalizing this one, and I have half an hour left, so let's go. I'm gonna pick up some questions before I start going into more detail. Bruna asks, I want to start learning how to draw, but I'm a mess. I know it's a long-term goal and it needs constant patience and practice, but I have no idea where to start this process. Do you have any suggestions and advice? So I think that if you have the goal to get better at drawing, it's very important to have like an idea of what do you want to get better at drawing. So not just in general, but like what specifically do you want to become good at? And everybody has their specific inspirations. Everybody has stuff that sort of inspired them to learn how to draw, or and that's really what you have to work off of, because really you can't be good at everything. You know, you have to sort of develop your area of expertise, basically. So I think that before you actually start drawing, really reflect on your inspirations and reflect on your goals. Like, do you want to become a good character artist, or do you want to become a good environment artist, or do you just want to be a good painter? There's a lot of different things you can do and learn. And then I would just say focus on that goal alone, and don't become distracted by the desire to become good at everything, because artists want to do that. They're very motivated and they can appreciate technical skills, so a lot of artists are like, well, I want to be able to do a bit of everything. But just focus on your goal and sort of set realistic goals for yourself, and if you work towards that, then you can stay focused, and you can also see better whether you're improving or not. Because a big problem amongst many artists is that they don't see their own improvement because they're so hard on themselves. So if you set a more realistic goal, then you can actually see, you can track your own improvement better. I think that the best place to start for any artist is sketching from reference. So taking reference material to start with, and then drawing from this reference as quickly as you can. Try to challenge yourself to draw fast, and this way you learn to observe better, you learn to stylize and adapt your workflow to what your brain sees first, but you're also learning like the technical skills behind trying to capture a certain kind of, trying to capture whatever you're trying to draw, you know, whether it's nature or people or whatever. So I think it really starts with sketching, and then from there, you know, try to start finalizing your work more and more, but get the sketching down first. And sometimes some artists only do sketches and they never move beyond that, and I think that's great too, because sketches are really like give a lot of insight into somebody's skills. All right, so as you can see for this drawing right now, I am sort of picking colors off of the canvas, and this is what I meant before where I say that I sculpt with color, because what I basically do is there's already a bunch of colors on the canvas, and all I need to do is take the Alt-click button. So I take the eyedropper shortcut, and I just take what's there, and I try to work with that. So I'm trying not to introduce too many new colors to the color scheme at this point. It's all about just making use of what you have. And that's why it's really good to sort of get a rough color setup before you go into more detail. And the reason that I like working on one layer is then you can easily change things too. Like, a lot of people don't want to work on multiple layers because they want to be able to easily change something, but I think it's actually more easy to change something when you're all on one layer. I just use like a hack, like the lasso tool. I want to move the mouse a little, so I select it with the lasso tool, I copy paste it to a new layer, and then I just nudge it around until it is where I want it to be. And then I just merge it back down. And the worst case scenario is that you might get like a little bit of like rough edges or some areas that don't make sense anymore, but then you can just go in and polish that up and fix it. And to me, this is all so much more intuitive and so much faster than having a separate line art layer, having to find that layer, change the line art, change the coloring, and all of the work that goes into that. So that's just how I prefer to work. So Um, I got a question. How did you come to a decision to have an office and not work from home? Was it a difficult decision? Did you rent an apartment or an actual office in an office building? I came to the decision to rent an office fairly quickly. I think that I worked from home when I graduated from college. I worked from home for about like half a year, and then I was like, this isn't working. It had a little to do as well with the house that I was living in at the time, because my office space was also like a sort of walk-in closet. It was basically like all these clothes behind me and all my junk everywhere, and then there was like a tiny desk in the corner, and that's where I worked. And it was like just not inspiring. I felt really locked up there, and also the thing that happens when I work from home is that I don't really start my day in a way that is, I just don't, I just have some coffee, but I stay in my pajamas and I never really make the mental switch. I get distracted by things like whether the house is cleaned up, and I end up not working as much as I want to, or if I do, then it sort of like interferes with my home life. So I didn't have healthy boundaries there. So then I just rented a space. There's like in the Netherlands, in Utrecht, there was a thing called Sophie's Kunstprojecten, which basically rented out spaces for creative people in sort of like in buildings that they temporarily had a contract with, but for like a period of like 5 years, so fairly long, and they rented for a low price. So I was like, okay, the commitment is very low. I can use this as my office just for the time being. And then I ended up I could. So once you have select for ads, use the workshop grade to get to the next step. And now I'd say we're good to move to the next step, which is grouping all the layers together. Again, like I did with the line art. And then duplicating that group, merging it. Everything's together now, which means that I can do one more round of color correction and it will affect everything, the lines and the colors that have been blocked in and the background, which is why I prefer to work on one layer, because it just makes life so much easier when it comes to color correcting. So all right, we're okay to start finalizing this one, and I have half an hour left, so let's go. I'm gonna pick up some questions before I start going into more detail. It needs an idea of what do you want to get better at drawing. So not just in general, but like what specifically do you want to become good at? And everybody has their expertise basically. So sort of develop your area of expertise basically.